Good afternoon, good evening, welcome one and all. You joining me here today in Harrogate, and it's Mayday. So what I thought we'd do on this tour is go for a walk in Harrogate. We're going to look through the cherry blossoms first up. Harrogate, very famous for its cherry blossoms on the Stray. And then we're going to go through a walk in the town, looking out for flowers wherever we can see them, and end up in the Valley Gardens. And we're going to talk about Mayday, because Mayday quite closely wrapped up with flowers, all things flora, which you're going to find out we're going to talk about a little bit later on. So it seemed to me sort of opposite, but I thought that we would start here, somewhere we've not been before in Harrogate, on the sort of other side of the Stray. So if I just turn us over, we appear to be going over a little bridge here on the Stray. We're actually crossing over the railway line, Harrogate station, just kind of in front of us there. So York station, we're kind of back in that kind of direction. What we have here is a lovely avenue of cherry blossoms that I believe is going to be voted to be fantastic, one of the finest cherry blossom avenues anywhere in the country. So I thought it'd be kind of nice to have a little promenade up and down the cherry blossom walk before we head into the town. So I thought, and these, by the way, were planted, I understand, in 1953. So they're all, I guess, sort of 70 odd years of age. Well, what do I think of this one? Then walk back up the other one. And aren't they pretty? Aren't they absolutely lovely? So this was to commemorate, celebrate, whatever the appropriate word is, to mark the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II, our late Queen, back in 1953. So they're now sort of pretty mature. So these trees, how long is 1953? 70 odd years, isn't it now? So they are very mature cherry trees. And of course they have this very, very distinctive, beautiful, pink, delicate blossom, which is every bit as lovely. I'm about to say it, Tish, not just up on the trees, but also how it kind of creates this carpet effect on the lawn, which I think is just so beautiful. It reminds me of that bit in Wizard of Oz, where they go through the field and the flowers and they're poisoned, but they can't sort of help, and they're sort of lured and they lie down and they fall asleep. That always kind of reminds me of that. I always want to kind of lie down in blossom. There's something so beautiful about it, and so delicate. And again, it's got that ephemeral quality as we stand here and walk through it. I'll just stop for a minute and you can probably see them kind of floating down to the ground. So it's not here to last, but in some respects that makes it even more perfect than something that is here all year round. It is absolutely delightful. And I've never brought you down here before on a tour, so I thought, well, it's high time. Other guides take you to see flowers, Stefan, Erico, a few others, Mark. So I thought, well, I'll get in on the action as well. And we'll do you. So Dawn walked to school through some cherry trees. It was like snow. Yeah, they do. They just kind of, when the wind just catches them, doesn't mean to just, they just float off. So there's a dreamlike quality to cherry blossom. And I think this is just a particularly lovely avenue. So, we can look down. So I think if we cross over, we'll walk up the other one as well, and then we'll head into the town. What's business? Oh, fantastic. Well, it's delightful to have you on board. Still no sign of myself, but finally the TV. Isn't that weird? Wow. There you go. I can't explain that, I'm afraid. Other than, I'm glad you can hear me on your TV. So we're on the Stray. The Stray, by the way, is 200 acres of land, formerly belonging to the Crown, in effect gifted in perpetuity to the Corporation of Harrogate to look after, to maintain for the people. And it's a big open space. Very, very Harrogate, of course, very, very beautiful place. No, there isn't a strong scent KCM. I'll come up and have a little nosegay and let's see if I can smell it. I'll probably start streaming with hay fever afterwards, but all in the. No, I'd say they're almost without scent, or at least to me. But then I haven't perhaps got the strongest sense of smell. But yeah, so these are planted on the Stray, so that you've got two sort of cherry walkways here. And the Stray kind of wraps its way around half of Harrogate and links together the town Obviously the wells, the source of water, the springs and so forth, and it all kind of glues it all together with this beautiful kind of open space. But it gives Harrogate a very, very grand feeling to it. It really is a kind of a fairly luxurious kind of place where it feels like there ought to be time to walk down the Cherry Blossom Avenue, if that kind of makes sense. A place where rushing from one place to another is a lesser consideration perhaps than the quality of life. I don't know how good the light is, but they are almost so beautiful that you want them to last forever. Not a scratch and assist. So this is the Stray, absolutely, this is the Stray. So the Stray 200 acres that surround Harrogate. So the reason I chose Harrogate today, obviously, is, or rather, when I was going to do a Mayday tour, I thought, well, where shall I go? Because obviously I could talk about Mayday anywhere. I could sit at home and talk about Mayday. But I thought, well, to me, I so closely associate Mayday with flowers and flora that I thought, why don't we go somewhere where we can look at some flowers and talk about these kind of traditions, and then we've kind of got a visual element of it, and hopefully some sort of brain candy as well. So if that kind of suits, we'll kind of do that. So we're here on this kind of wonderful, obviously historic day of kind of celebration. The 1st of May, though, is interesting. I'll just sort of start by saying it's a weird contradiction as far as days of observance go, because it's a holiday that's kind of got a multiple personality disorder. On the one hand, it's dedicated to strike and protest, and on the other, embracing all things spring and kind of frolicsome. So dealing with the first bit, in the late 19th century, leaders of the Socialist Second International were fighting for an 8-hour workday, and they called for a global day of protest to be held on May the 1st, 1890. And it's kind of lived on as the International Workers' Day, received kind of renewed vigour in the United States over the years, probably more so than over here. Also, since the 18th century, many Roman Catholics observe May, and Mayday various kind of May devotions to the Blessed Virgin Mary. In kind of works of art, school plays and so forth. And so Mary's head will be adorned with flowers in a May crowning. But in some respects, it feels a bit like it's the church getting in a bit late on the act. They certainly didn't instigate any of this. But I can tell you about it. But the 1st of May is also one of 2 feast days, the Catholic patron saint workers, St. Joseph the Worker. So that's obviously the carpenter, the husband to Mother Mary and foster father of Jesus. He's got his saint's day on May the 1st. And it wasn't there originally, it was actually moved. Yeah, we'll talk about maypole dancing a little bit. It was moved because the church weren't at all happy with the kind of the May Day as being a sort of communist, Marxist thing, because obviously that's very, very anti-clerical, generally speaking. And so Pope Pius XII chose May the 1st to move St. Joseph's Day to, as a kind of counterpoint to the Communist International Workers' Day. So it's a little bit of sour grapes, really. So if you even know why St. Joseph's Day is May the 1st, it is to detract attention for Catholics from taking part in the international socialist movement. So there we go. Aren't they beautiful? They are indeed. So these are all kind of relatively new elements of it. But he's absolutely certain that May Day belongs to the pagan tradition. It's a pagan festival in pre-Christian times, and it kind of peaks as a celebration in the Middle Ages. It starts by honouring the Roman goddess of Flora. And the date was also associated with other festivals, such as the Celtic festival of Beltan, which we're going to talk about at length. And I think we'll go this way towards the town now. And the Germanic festival of Walpurgis Night. So the earliest known May celebrations appear with the Floralia, which is the festival of Flora. And she's the Roman goddess of flowers. So Flora, floral, from Flora, the Roman goddess of flowers, in case you ever wondered. And that festival was held between the 27th of April and the 3rd of May during the Roman Republic era. So the Floralia opened with theatrical performances. And in the Floralia, Ovid, the Roman poet, says that hares and goats were released as part of the festivities. So again, not dissimilar to what we talked about a few weeks ago, didn't we, about Easter things and introducing Easter Bunny's got hares as part of the kind of Mayday. So this pre-Christian stuff does seem to weave in animals very much into these celebrations. And during the celebration, a bundle of wheat ears. So there's wheat ears are like kind of straws that are being harvested. We still got the grains on top. They were carried into a shrine that was devoted to Flora or Ceres. Now Ceres was the Roman god of grain, Flora of flowers. So this was about it's a thank you, isn't it? It's like a harvest festival. It's a blessing, isn't it, to the gods for bounty. So from right from its kind of outset, it was about fertility, it was about growth, it was about agriculture, it was about food, and kind of all those sort of things. So whatever's been put onto it afterwards is not superfluous. I mean, it's perfectly valid, people to do whatever they want to do on May Day, but its origins are all about food and fertility. So marking the kind of beginning of spring, this is what it's kind of most noted for in history. May Day has kind of long been celebrated to mark vitality and fertility, which means that the early incarnation of the holiday involved all kinds of kind of raucous debauchery. And I hate to say it, if somebody wants to explain to me the history of religion is largely split between, excuse my crudity, those religions that want you to have loads of sex and those that want you to have next to none. And this definitely belongs to the first group, which is encouraging people to make merry and roll in the hay and be plentiful and plentiful, whatever the words is, plentiful, and lots of families and all that kind of stuff. So it's very much parked in the kind of former camp. So along with kind of frisky antics, some other traditions were born through May Day as well. And we're going to explore some of the meanings of these. But first, let's kind of get a misunderstanding out there. I'm just going to cross over this road, and then we're going to have a look at some flowers on our way into Harrogate as we talk about this. One of the most famous references to May Day, of course, is the international call single, Mayday. And you might think, well, how is that associated with May Day? And the reality is, it isn't. It is nothing to do with it whatsoever. It derives from the French venez m'aider, meaning come help me. So Mayday, come to help. Okay, venez, to come, you come, yeah? So there you go. There's a little factlet for you. It'll drop a little nugget of knowledge on you at the early part of the tour. So in case next time you hear Mayday, you'll know it's nothing to do with the day itself and everything to do with the French saying, come help me. So I'm going to cross over again, and then we're on the right side. Oh, we're on the wrong side actually, but is it a fruit fly? Is it a fruit fly in mood fly? Absolutely. So like a fruit fly, be like a fruit fly, and do what you're here to do. Leave little ones behind. So, where were we? Already kind of lost. So Beltane, let's talk about that. And you may have heard of Beltane. I think Paul Stewart has done stuff about Edinburgh. It's kind of Scottish thing, it's Irish thing really, but Gaelic, Celtic, however you want to kind of call it, ancient British. So many of the kind of folklore customs we associate with kind of Mayday. I think we're going to talk about like Mayday, the May Dew, the May Pole, the Morris dancing, all these kind of associations really kind of come back to Beltane. There's 4 major festivals in the ancient Celtic year, and Beltane, or the Fire of Bel, had a sort of particular significance for the Celts because it represents to them the first day of the summer, and it's celebrated with bonfires to welcome in the new season. And it's kind of still celebrated today. There's definitely an appetite for this up in Scotland. In Edinburgh there is the Beltane Festival on the 1st of May, so that will be happening today. But it's more associated really with Ireland than Scotland historically, or rather the earliest evidence. And as ever with these things, talk about the earliest kind of written sources that we can find, from archaeology and from history and so forth, puts it as a kind of Irish. And it's mentioned in the kind of very, very earliest Irish literature and associated with important events in Irish mythology. I'm going to cross over because we're going to be walking down some lovely flowers down here. Just bear with me. Just very busy at this time of day, so it's lovely to be out but because it's rush hour, I've just got to get across a few busy roads, and I'll get us completely out of the traffic. So apologies if it's a bit noisy at this point, but it's just crisscrossing. I want to start with the cherry blossom and then get us down to the garden. So consequently, we had to. So Beltane, yeah, absolutely. Okay, Beltane, B-E-L-T-A-N-E, Beltane. Right. So it's also known as Quetzalmain, or Sawn, right? The first of summer. So it's a similar spelling word to, of course, All Hallows, Samhain, which is the Irish version of Halloween. So this is Beltane, and it marks the beginning of the pastoral summer. And this is when the livestock are driven out to the summer pastures. So it's a kind of change. It's a changing of the seasons. And people that have been living with their animals finally get to get their animals out, and they get to breathe a little easier away from the nasty fug of sharing your house with your cattle and your livestock. But of course, putting your animals out was to a degree to put them in harm's way. So you need to be thinking about, okay, how can you protect your livestock? You're only driven back to summer pastures. How do you protect them from witches, from fairies, from malignant spirits? And so much of what we're about to tell you is invocations and customs that were developed to give people peace of mind, knowing that they could put their livestock out, but that the witches wouldn't come and feast on the blood of their cattle, which you can kind of see. So spring cleaning, Susan's on it, yeah? So all these things that trigger, when we get to certain times of year, will trigger in us, like the nesting thing, isn't it, that we talk about, often more, kind of young mums and everything, isn't it? Or pre-birth mothers. But there's certain things, isn't there, just sort of stimulating us an urge to renew, to kind of revitalise, to get things nice. And of course, in winter, we in coal fires all year round, everything will be very mucky and all this, that and the other, kind of carbon, clean your chimneys, clean everything down. So my spring cleaning after a winter of burning a fire would be the kind of thing to do. So these are all sort of practices that are based in the way we used to live. As I say, so with this great deal of kind of superstition about witches and supernatural, people, of course, wanted to know their livestock was going to be safe. So the rituals were held to protect the livestock from harm. So here we are now, just starting to come into the edge of Harrogate town centre now. Beautiful, beautiful place of flowers. And this harm could be both natural and supernatural, and it involved the kind of symbolic use of fire. So special bonfires were kindled, and to increase the potency of the holy flames, in Britain at least, they were often kindled by the most primitive of all means. And what this meant was, like the really sort of Stone Age way of lighting a fire, where you get a stick and a piece of string and rub it backwards and forwards to generate friction and heat, set fire to it. That's how, thank you, Lizzie, that's how these fires had to be lit. So it wasn't just a case of lighting a fire, it was a very, very kind of basic approach to kind of lighting the fire, whereby, you had to do it through this really, really kind of intense, kind of human effort. You couldn't take the easy way out, because they're supposed to do so would be to kind of, to sort of suggest that you weren't kind of putting all your effort into it, really. So it was all about kind of demonstrating you were doing it the proper way, the tough way. And it's obviously done in this manner. When the fire was lit, oh dear, Tina. Thankfully, it looks like there's a few ones, so some obviously managed to. I apologise if it was missing, but there we go. So smoke and ashes, that once they'd burned out like this, was said to have a kind of protective power. So consequently, by lighting your fire in this way and burning it in this fashion, there was a value then to the ashes, what was left over. Aren't these pretty? What are these little flowers? You lot are all brilliant bosses, and hopefully by having the screen definition up a little bit, it's easier for you to help me out. Look at a ladybird there sat on that one. But you lot are all brilliant at knowing the names of flowers, so do let me know. And we'll come over here, because I really like these wide, taking these shots wide, dropping low, and giving you just a nice wide carpety feel. So the people in their kind of cattle would walk around or in between the bonfires. Sometimes they'd leap over the flames of the embers. And before the bonfire was lit, to these special Beltane bonfires, all household fires would be doused. And when the bonfire kind of died down, people would then daub themselves in the ashes. So not at all dissimilar to Ash Wednesday. Of course, we're talking about in the Easter celebration. We're at Jervo the other day. A couple of weeks ago now, wasn't it? But so again, done with ashes. So this is pre-Christian, but again, it's got many parallels between pre-Christian pagan behaviours and the established kind of Christian behaviours. Berry daisies, thank you. Wallflowers, beautiful. So you've got people daubing themselves with these ashes they believe, have these magical properties. And they then sprinkle the ashes over their crops and livestock. And as we know, quite a lot of plant feeds, aren't they? Have ashes, don't they? And various these kind of carbon compounds in them. So again, it's not surprising that the plants would kind of flourish. That is very much something the plants, I'm sure, would kind of appreciate. So again, you can kind of see how this link will be made between treating the plants with these ashes from these fires, and the plants are kind of responding well and growing well. So it then just becomes sort of self-fulfilling, doesn't it? Because you keep doing it, and every year you get a validation and a kind of vindication that it's worked. So you do it again, so you believe in it more and you invest in it more. So it really is a kind of a self-fulfilling, if that's kind of the right way of kind of putting it. I'm glad you're enjoying it, Fran. I'm just trying to, as I say, experiment with 1080 HD where I can. Still don't know how widespread I can get away with this. Obviously, if it's creating some people some problems, to kind of look at that with Linda's sound issues. But I'm all for it. I think it's the best way. And for those of you that have sat through cloudy Zooms, I think that this is most definitely a breath of kind of fresh air. So burning torches from the bonfires would then be kind of taken to people's homes and carried round the houses or the boundaries of the farmstead to go to each the corner of people's houses and kind of bless them with these kind of smoking, smouldering branches from the fire. And then these were used to relight the hearth in the home. And from these kind of practices, we can see that the fire was seen as having protective powers. So this is lovely. I love this. I don't know if it's like is this like a cordyline? It's a lovely kind of almost like a variegated cordyline, which I've got in my garden. My wife has really. Again, this lovely red and yellow, but now it's a very kind of palmy kind of look. So we come around this side and you can get a nice contrast. So Dawn's gran always threw ashes on the garden, and she probably swore by it, because probably it just saw kind of similar results. And this is the thing, is a lot of this stuff works. And so whether we put it down to nature, botany, green fingers, supernatural, witchcraft or whatever, the bottom line is it works. So you can kind of see how these things get embedded into custom and practice. It's very, very kind of easy off. I'm glad it's back for you. Some lovely sort of stone buildings here. So they're seeing the fire as having protective elements to it. So similar kind of rituals that are part of these midsummer customs of Mayday in other parts of the British Isles and mainland Europe were very, very similar, to lots and lots of echoes. And whilst, of course, what we don't ever have in history is, the history of the world all written at the same time with comparative, what historians are able to do, of course, is draw on multiple sources, whether they be artworks, poems, sagas, documents, that they can find from different parts of the British Isles, different parts of Europe, from similar times, referencing similar things, which can suggest to us that it is that these are kind of common practices. And it's not hugely surprising when we think of the fact that the Romans controlled much of Europe. One time the Vikings controlled much of Europe. That there were several kind of dominant kind of races that imposed their culture right the way across Europe. So it's not hugely surprising that within that mix you would find then patterns of behaviour and custom repeated from place to place. So perhaps that's why, but slightly kind of different variants. And it's kind of believed that these fire rituals kind of had an imitative or sort of sympathetic magic that was meant to mimic the sun, and can ensure a needful supply of sunshine for men, animals and plants. That was what people were hoping for. So, and again, we could do a comparative going all the way back to the ancient Egyptians, with their deification, of Ra, of Helios in the Greeks, is that appealing to the sun god, because people understood well enough that without the rays of the sun, without rain, without nutrients, you don't get to sustain life. You don't get, whether that be kind of plants, foodstuffs, food for your animals, whatever it may be. So people understood. They might address it up in mythology and prayed to gods around it, rather than seeing it as natural sciences. But nonetheless, the knowledge was there. They understood the importance of sun, rain, nutrients, etc. So consequently, Susan talks about flowers, but they ignore her. Well, that's very unfair, Susan. That's most unsporting of them. So there was also a sense of trying to burn away, sort of burn up and destroy the harmful influences. So, they're perishing by fire. Let's not forget, of course, witches historically destroyed by fire. A sense of burning in hell, isn't there? Do you know what I mean? That somehow evil can be destroyed by fire. So the potency of fire is being invoked here to destroy these evil spirits that would give us bad harvests, that would kind of suckle on our cattle, that would drink their milk, which is what witches were accused of doing, of course. Was kind of taking from the animals, suckling on the blood, suckling on the milk, leaving them barren so that your cows wouldn't be able to have calves. All you did when the calves were born, taking those calves and eating them. So these kind of Beltane gatherings, these kind of ancient British Celtic gatherings, were often accompanied by a feast, and some of the food and drink would be offered then to the spirits. In the Scottish Highlands, we know there was a feast featuring lamb, and of course the lamb was sacrificed. Not surprisingly, is it? I mean, given years gone by, surprising humans weren't sacrificed, really. But the lamb will be tied up, so quite biblical, really, and sacrificed. And we also know that up in Perthshire, they would make a caudle, which would be like a batter. And this mixture was poured on the ground as a libation for the spirits. And then everyone would take an oatmeal cake called a Beltane bannock. And these had 9 knobs, so like on the edge of them, 9 bits you could break off. And each person would face the fire, break off one of the knobs from their biscuit, their dry biscuit, one by one, and throw it over the shoulder, offering it to the spirits to protect their livestock. One to protect the horses, one to protect the sheep, and so forth. And also offering them to the predators that might do them harm. So one to the fox, one to the eagle, and so forth. So it was both a protection, invocation, and an offering at the same time. They're trying to buy off the aggressors, if you like, and protect at the same time. And according to 18th century writers, we know that in parts of Scotland there's another ritual involving the Beltane bannock, and this is where the cake will be cut, and one of the slices will be marked with charcoal, so again with the ashes, with the burning of the fire remnants. The slices will then be put in a bonnet, and everyone would take one out blindfolded. So of course what you're looking to see is who's going to draw out the one that is marked with the ashes. And whoever got the marked piece had to leap through the fire 3 times, and those present then would pretend to throw the person into the fire. And it was customary then to talk. I'm going to see, look, I've got the tulips by the war memorial. It's then customary then to talk about that person as if they died, as if they'd perished in the fire sometime afterwards. And this may, deep down, embody, a collective memory that we have of human sacrifice. Who knows? We certainly know human sacrifice happened in certain parts of the world. There's limited evidence of it happening in Western Europe, but it just may be that this idea of somebody dying to bring about the protection for the beginnings of summer may well be something that's happened in times where perhaps slaves that have been captured, those that have been on the wrong side of conflicts, ended up as prisoners of war, may have been, who knows, human sacrifice. There's no evidence of it, but it's kind of interesting that these practices, this idea of throwing people into the fire and leaving them and talking them as if they're dead, does seem to convey, doesn't it, this idea, this connection with a human sacrifice for the spring. Let's come in here. These are very, very pretty. I don't want to tread on them, but aren't they beautiful? Again, are these wallflowers again, we would say, in and amongst the tulips? I think they're absolutely delightful. Loving this. So doors, windows and livestock would actually be decorated with yellow mayflowers, perhaps because they evoked fire. What we know is in parts of Ireland they make a maybush. Now then, a maybush was a thorn bush or branch decorated with flowers, ribbons, bright shells and a rushlight. And often the shells could be eggshells because they'd be left over from decorating from the Easter shells a few weeks earlier. And so they would then go on to the kind of maybush. So you get this kind of great sort of riot of kind of colour and decoration on the kind of maybush. And there's also kind of rituals to protect the crops, dairy products and people, and also to encourage growth. The spirits called the Eosi, spirits, fairies, were thought to be kind of especially active at Beltane, as also at Samhain, so around Halloween. And it's at this times of the year, it's felt that the wall between the spiritual world and the natural world goes down to its thinnest area. In historic English folklore, Midsummer Nights was the night where it's its thinnest, and you could get this passage backwards and forwards between the worlds of the living and the dead, the supernatural and the actual, the natural. So Beltane kind of recognised that was kind of part and parcel of it, this kind of synergy between the supernatural and the actual world. So many of the kind of goals of Beltane was about appeasing these spirits, these presences that were kind of around. And many people think of these fairies, the Eosi, again, as being related to the original pagan gods. So whilst nominally we moved from being pagans to being Christians, in reality, for this largely kind of uneducated population, superstition, narrative, custom hung on an awful lot longer than the church may have wished to kind of give you that impression. So it's all well and good saying we've converted all these people to church and they now take communion every Sunday. But scratch the surface and underneath it all, you've still got the same custom, practice, belief systems. I think that's still pretty common, right? You can't, what's that thing you can take the girl out of, but you can't, that one, right? I think it's that kind of idea, really. It's really, really difficult to scrub out customs when as a kid you've kind of grown up and your grandma's taught you to do this and thought about that, and you prepare this recipe, you do this, and you leave this on the doorstep and all that sort of stuff. It hangs in there, doesn't it? It's very sticky, is that kind of custom and culture. And I think that's kind of what's being kind of found. So Beltane then is about this kind of spring festival of kind of optimism, during which the kind of fertility ritual was important. Perhaps connecting it with the waxing power of the sun. So very much, as I say, a focus on fertility of new life. And we still talk about that today, don't we? Talk about the spring lambs, all these kind of things. So we do very much, I think, still culturally, we might call it different things and might think it's just a kind of an observance of nature. But there's something about it, isn't it? The eggs of Easter, rebirth, renewal, growth. It's another side of the same sort of coin, I think, that is very much kind of linked into this time of year. So there's an almost identical Mayday tradition in parts of Wales, and mock burnings were kind of part of spring and summer bonfire festivals in other parts of Europe. So again, you've got very, very similar, if not identical, custom, practice, traditions, festivals being carried out in different parts of Europe that are ostensibly a bit different, but quite clearly coming from the same root. And of course, they're on the same day. They're all about kind of May the 1st. So there's a very, very deep-rooted observance of May Day as this beginning. That this is the time when it all kind of starts. So flowers, integral part of this. So flowers and May bushes were part of the kind of Beltane celebration in Ireland, in Scotland. We know about the Isle of Man as well. And many of these customs reported right up to the 19th, even into the 20th century. We know that yellow and particularly white flowers were used extensively. So primrose, rowan, hawthorn, gorse, hazel and marsh marigold were traditionally placed at doorways and in windows. And sometimes loose flowers were also strewn in doorways and at windows, or made into bouquets, garlands or crosses and fastened to them. So there's something about thresholds, that crossing over from one time of the year to another is clearly represented here by the threshold. So as you kind of cross the thresholds, that is marked by flowers. So you've got, a symbolic crossing, but also an actual crossing in terms of the doorway. So again, I think you can sort of see, how that kind of knits together. Another lovely. We're so fortunate in Harrogate being so nearby to pop down, because it is A, so beautiful, but B, they put in such effort. I wish York did, were able to put as much effort into this. But of course the difference is that in Harrogate, right in the town centre, you've got all these green spaces, which we don't have in York. Of course we've got the museum gardens, but Harrogate is much more interwoven with greenery, and it works beautifully. So those lovely red flowers we were looking at earlier, somebody mentioned what the name was, we've now got the pink ones. Aren't they just glorious? So Lily of the Valley featured in the Victorian Bride's Bouquet. Isn't that interesting? So they'd also fasten flowers to cows and equip for milking and butter making. So again, they're looking to bless, protect, however you want to put it, the entire kind of apparatus, including the animal itself, the producer of the dairy, to kind of make absolutely sure that the dark side isn't able to kind of get in. I love these flowers. They're so pretty. I hope that's coming through as a kind of nice, kind of clear. But the pinkies are gorgeous, aren't they? So it's likely these flowers are used because they evoked fire. And again, we can see that similar Mayday customs are kind of found right the way across Europe. Let me just get a drink and then we'll talk. Lily of the Valley, which ones are they, Ronnie Lynn? I'm not brilliant, as you all know. I never pretend to be great on the names of flowers, but I know you lot are so knowledgeable that I point the camera and you tell me what it is that we're looking at. So let me just get a little sip of water and we'll then walk on. Not far from the gardens, which is nice. Bellis daisies, good. I'm really pleased about that. That's absolutely what we want to see, isn't it? Is nice, crisp. And in a few months' time, of course, the dahlias will be out in the gardens. So we'll come back and have a look. We'll come back to Harrogate in time to see the dahlias. Maybe we'll do an Agatha Christie tour as well while we're here, because we're not doing Agatha Christie for a while. So let's talk about the May bush then, or the May bough, which is popular in parts of Ireland. It's a small tree or a branch, typically hawthorn, rowan, holly or sycamore. And this is now decorated with kind of bright flowers, ribbons, the painted shells, as we said earlier, the decorative eggshells from Easter Sunday. So the whole thing, is just doused in colour. And they either decorate that tree where it stood, or place inside a house, particularly above windows and doors, or on the roof or on barns. And it was generally the responsibility of the oldest person in the house to decorate the May bush. And the tree would then remain up till the 31st of May. So consequently, for all of May, you'd have the May bush. Like the Casniera clout till May be out. Have we heard of that? Don't take enough any layers of clothing till the end of May. Casniera clout till May be out. Right. They'd also decorate the tree with candles or rushlights. So really, it's bringing to mind a Christmas tree if you think about it, but it's for obviously for May and spring. Sometimes a May bush will be paraded through the town. In parts of Southern Ireland, gold and silver hurling balls, known as May balls, will be hung on the May bushes. So again, I'm just having to cross over the road here. You see all the tourist coaches, the perennially popular place for visitors. I've been doing a bit of in-person work here today, so that's why I'm in Harrogate. But it's always nice to combine the two. So the May bush then were given out to children or the winners of hurling matches, a hurling sport in Ireland. And in Dublin and in Belfast, we found that May bushes were brought into the town from the countryside and decorated by whole neighbourhoods, so kind of community projects decorating. And then there'd be kind of voting on, tell you what, should we go, if I can get onto the Crown roundabout, we're going to have a look at these flowers. Do start getting run over, that would be a bonus. Yeah, I think we can. So another roundabout, this is the Crown Hotel, is our backdrop here. So we've got a ornamental crown in the forefront, but now we've got white versions of these lovely, lovely flowers. So each neighbourhood would then, obviously, they'd all decorate. So the neighbours would come together, they decorate their own version. It's like a competition, right, to see who's done the best one. And there was often a lot of sneakiness went on, people kind of the allegations of people, harming or stealing trees and all this other, to such a degree that actually they outlawed the May bush in the Victorian years because they felt it just caused too much trouble, too much antagonism between neighbourhoods. So, but in other places, it was customary to sing and dance around the May bush. And at the end of the festivities, it may have been burnt in the bonfire. So again, it's a variation of the May bush here on the maypole, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But it's always the same thing. It's like kind of worship, veneration, dancing. So much. For those that one of my great favourite films, The Wicker Man. Every time you kind of think about The Wicker Man, those that have seen that, that's so representative, I think, do you know what I mean, of the whole spirit of the Mayday celebrations. It's a bit mad, it's a bit risque, it's purely pagan, it's incredibly colourful, it's noisy, it's joyous, and there's something a bit sinister about it all. So it really is brilliant. If you've not seen The Wicker Man, do watch it. So in some places, the May bush was actually called the maypole, but that's rather confusing because it's not what we're thinking of. It's not the upright, kind of the ribbons and all that sort of stuff. So don't kind of get them mixed up. It's not the European maypole, but nonetheless there are records calling the May bush this decorated tree, which either be in the house or it could be put in the town, was called a maypole. But that's just to confuse us, unfortunately. Now, thorn trees were traditionally seen as special trees associated with the fairies, the Aosi. And if those have come across it, there's a book called The Golden Bough by Sir James Fraser, and it is a sort of book and dictionary, a compendium, Victorian, of English folklore, customs, magic, ancient kind of British stuff, really. He kind of really looks into the roots of it. It's a great, I was reading some of it, looking up for bits and pieces for this tour. It's a great book. So interesting, have always known more about Cinco de Mayo than Mayday. Oh, fantastic, thank you, really. That has to do with a Mexican, is it a naval victory, Cinco de Mayo? Anyway, never mind. So, there's this custom of decorating trees or poles in the springtime, and it seems to be a relic of tree worship. And James Fraser writes in this kind of this definitive work, the intention of these customs is to bring home to the village and each house the blessings which the tree spirit has in its power to bestow. Now, if this is kind of the case, it's remarkably similar to how the Vikings were bringing a tree, an evergreen, into their homes, the Yule tree, to come, of course, the Christmas tree, which you may have heard me talking about on my Christmas tours. But as the May bush is a common problem. Oh, fantastic, thanks, Susan. But just a very brief kind of primer on that, the Vikings believed that the tree spirits were their great protectors, and they lived in evergreens, the trees that didn't lose their leaves over winter, but that during winter, these tree spirits, these ghosts, would wander the earth. And so to encourage the tree spirits to come back, they would cut an evergreen, decorate it, bring it into the houses to lure the spirits back, their protectors. So very, very kind of similar vibe to what's kind of being talked about there with the thorn trees. So a lot of these kind of customs are floating around. Some may have begun in Ireland, some may have begun in England, but they are kind of associated, should we put it that way, with this kind of part of Western Europe. In Ireland, it's very unlucky to damage thorn trees. They are lucky and unlucky trees. And it's been suggested that Beltane was the only time when cutting thorn trees was allowed. And the practice of kind of bedecking the May bush with flowers, ribbons, garlands and bright shells is still found amongst the Gaelic diaspora. So I was looking at this, and apparently in Newfoundland, in Canada, but also parts of the east coast of America, where there is a strong Irish identity, Boston and so forth, the May bush is still something that is practiced, which is fantastic, because it's largely died out over here. So many of these practices were kind of designed, let's say, to ward off or appease fairies and prevent them from stealing dairy products. So, for example, 3 black coals were placed under a butter churn to ensure that the fairies didn't steal the butter. Isn't that wonderful? Anne Rice, of course, she writes a lot of stuff, doesn't she? A vampire, isn't she? The May boughs were also tied to milk pails and the tails of cattle, to ensure that a cattle's milk was not stolen. So again, there was a belief that fairies and witches would steal the milk. Flowers also used to decorate the horns of cattle, which was believed to kind of bring good fortune, and food was left, or milk was poured on a doorstep of places associated with the fairies, such as fairy trees, as a kind of an offering. But milk was never given to a neighbour on May Day because it was feared that the milk would be transferred to a neighbour's cow. Make of that what you will. In Ireland, cattle would be brought to fairy forts where a small amount of their blood will be collected, and the owners would then pour it into the earth with prayers for the herd's safety. And now sometimes this blood will be left to dry and then be burnt. And it's thought that kind of dairy products were in particular, especially at risk from harmful spirits. So to protect farm produce and encourage fertility, farmers will lead a procession around the boundaries of their farm. They carry with them seeds of grain, implements of husbandry, the first well water and the herb vervain, or rowan if they couldn't get it. And the procession generally stopped at the 4 cardinal ports of the compass, so north, east, south and west, beginning in the east. And they perform rituals at each one. People making signs of the cross with milk for good luck on Beltane. And the sign of the cross was also made on the backsides of cattle. So they really did go to enormous lengths to protect their animals. People would also go and visit holy wells at these times in Beltane or the Gaelic festivals. And the visitors to holy wells would pray for health while walking sunwise, which means moving from east to west, around the well. And they would then leave offerings, typically coins or cluties. And cluties are like sort of strips of coloured cloth. And then the first water drawn from the well on Beltane was thought to be especially potent, or bring good luck to the person who drew it. Now also, morning dew was thought to bring good luck and health. So at dawn or before sunrise on Beltane, so in other words this morning, maidens would roll in the dew or wash their faces with it. The dew was collected in a jar, left in the sunlight and then filtered. And the dew was thought to increase sexual attractiveness, maintain youthfulness, protect from sun damage, particularly freckles and sunburn, and help with skin ailments for the ensuing year. So there you go. And it's also that if a man washes his face in the morning dew on May the 1st, then he'll grow long whiskers on his face. So there's all these ideas associated with what's coming out of the earth, out of the bounty. It's not just what's coming out of the animals, it's what's coming out of the environment with the morning dew. The flowers, everything is associated with magical properties that can kind of transform. It really is a fabulously, I think, exotic time. There's a pump room over there, by the way, in case you're wondering where we are, the beautiful pump room of Harrogate. And they are beautiful, aren't they? So it's widely believed that kind of no one should light a fire on Mayday morning until they saw the smoke rising from a neighbour's house. Now, I'm kind of puzzling with that one. I don't know if I'm missing something, because if everybody was waiting for somebody else to light a fire and see their smoke, I'm not quite sure how anybody would ever light the fire, but obviously I'm maybe missing something. It's also believed to be bad luck to put out the ashes or clothes on Mayday, and that to give away coal or ashes will give the giver difficulty in lighting fires for the next year. So very, very superstitious. There's some really kind of strict rules about what you could and couldn't do. Also, if the family owned a white horse, it should remain in the barn all day. And if any other horse was owned, a red rag should be tied to its tail. They believed that any foal that was born on Mayday was fated to kill a man. And that any cow that calved on Mayday would die. So you can see there's an awful lot of beliefs being wrapped up into this kind of Mayday celebration that didn't just impact animals. They believed that any birth or marriage on Mayday was generally believed to be ill-fated. So is there anybody amongst us that has celebrated our anniversary, either past or present on May the 1st? Do let me know whether this bad fortune has played a part in that relationship. On May night, a cake and a jug were left on a table because it was believed that the Irish who died abroad would return on May Day to their ancestral homes. And it was believed that the dead returned on May Day to visit their friends. So not at all dissimilar to Mexican Day of the Dead. We talked about Cinco de Mayo a minute ago. Obviously now Day of the Dead. So again, parallel. So is that because he's Irish and he's kind of Catholic? Or is it simply a kind of a pre-Christian thing that has come across continents and been shared? But yeah, this idea of the dead coming back, that there's certain times of the year where that layer between the living and the dead is so fine, it allows the easy passage from one side to the other. The sprites lit the first fires. So people believe that a robin that flew into the house on Beltane was believed to portend the death of a household member. It's a lovely plant, look at this one. So people, really put loads of meaning into this stuff, and we're really looking out for, here in Derbyshire, this will probably be Each village has a separate week to its well-dressing hours in August bank holiday week. Interesting. Thank you, Polly. So yeah, it would have been. It's sort of exhausting following these customs. It feels like a sort of a very strict religion, doesn't it? You know, what you can and can't do. Like you kind of need to study all the form for what you can. You better stay in bed. I think it's from what you sort of read. You know, you're better off doing nothing. Stay in bed during Mayday. But it would seem that kind of public celebration of Beltane have fallen out of popularity by the sort of 20th century. Though some sort of customs continued, and since the kind of late 20th century, you've now got sort of Celtic, sort of neo-pagans and Wiccans are sort of bringing all this stuff back, which is great. It's lovely. That's what they kind of want to do. There's a lot of renewed interest, isn't there? Do you know what I mean, in these old sort of belief systems? So they're making a little bit of a comeback. And interesting in the southern hemisphere, because obviously, if you just at the beginning of summer, it makes no sense. They're doing this on the 1st of November, so that's kind of interesting. So many of these sort of customs then, you know, transformed from Beltane and from Feralia into Mayday midsummer festivals across Britain and Europe across centuries. And Mayday has been associated obviously with fun, with kind of revelry, with of course fertility. The day will be marked with village folk cavorting around a maypole. And the kind of the maypole then is, for those that are not sure, a tall wooden pole erected as part of kind of various European folk festivals around which the maypole dance often takes place. Often you have ribbons associated and young maidens, young girls dancing in and out, kind of creating sort of complex sort of knitted patterns with the ribbons. So the festivals occurred on May the 1st or Whitsun, Pentecost. Although in some countries they were erected in midsummer, particularly in Scandinavia. And the maypole is a permanent feature, so compared to the May bush, which would be put in as a temporary thing, the maypole was there all year round. It's erected specifically for the purpose. So primarily the maypole is within nations of Germanic Europe and neighbouring areas with influence, obviously Britain being one of those. But the origins are unknown. There's obviously lots of speculation about what they're about, going back to the kind of Iron Age. There, of course, are those that have been kind of debated what the meaning of a maypole is, but there's no definitive answer. For some, it's about the world axis creating the centre of the world and dancing around it. Others, of course, have said it's to do with the sacred reverence for trees, so kind of dancing around a tree, worshipping trees, and that wooden pillars were kind of venerated by the pagans across much of Germanic Europe, including Thor's Oak and Imisol. Also known that, of course, in Norse paganism, cosmological views held the universal world tree known as Yggdrasil. So there's kind of a lot of trees are shot through an awful lot of kind of northern European. But there's also, of course, those that believe there's a phallic quality. Thomas Hobbes, the philosopher, one of the first to talk about this, the priapic quality, the maleness, as you might say, the maiden around it. And people have kind of given a lot of this. Sigmund Freud believed that this was the case, young maidens dancing around, you know, kind of erect phallus. And, you know, it's referenced in the novel Fanny Hill, which is a sort of like controversial, smutty book of the 18th century. So, of course, the poles thought to represent the masculine, while the decorations of flowers, wreaths and ribbons thought to symbolise the feminine, and the intertwining between them. But some scholars say, no, it's just a tree. You know, you read too much into this. So what's kind of, you know, fair to say is there is no, you know, one perspective on what the maypole is. And what we do know, of course, is that it could have been found on any kind of village green. They're incredibly popular. There's still quite a lot of them around. In England, there's one in Monkton, which isn't too far away from here. Pass it on the way home. So the celebration of fertility and abundance led to couples, it's said, disappearing into the fields and woods for a roll in the hay, so to speak. You know, so it's all about abundance, let's put it that way. It's a day marked by a libidinous mood. Excessive promiscuity encouraged increased fertility in general for the year ahead to come. So, as I say, there are those that argue that it's all about fertility and copying off and all that sort of good fun. But others argue maypole's simply part of a kind of general rejoicing at the return of the summer and didn't have any of those. They're all about growth of vegetation rather than kind of human fertility. So in this way, they kind of relate to the Mayday garlands, which are also common festival practice in Britain and Ireland. And then you've got, of course, the next element of these, the May Queen. So the May Queen is another feature of this. And again, this is widespread. It's very difficult to say where this sort of starts. But what you've got is a sort of selection of the May Queen is another custom synonymous with Mayday. So this is the lovely Magnesium Well Cafe, by the way. We're in the Valley Gardens at Harrogate, looking at the flowers. So the May Queen is a girl who kind of rides or walks at the front of the parade for May Day celebrations. Generally speaking, she'd wear a white gown to symbolise purity, and usually a tiara or a crown. And her job or duty is to begin the May Day celebrations. She's generally crowned by flowers and makes a speech before the dancing begins. So again, Sir James Fraser, the writer of The Golden Bough, had some thoughts about this, and he speculates the May Queen was linked to ancient tree worship. There are sometimes male companions to the May Queen associated with May Day customs, including personification as Father May, the King of May, the May King, the Garland King, the Green Man, or Jack in the Green. The Jack in the Green is kind of interesting because it's literally a man dressed as a bush. So the Jack in the Green consists of a wooden or wicker frame that's covered in woven foliage, including green branches, leaves and flowers. And it's worn on the upper half of the human body and carried along in May Day processions. So he's literally a man dressed as a bush walking at the front. And of course the Green Man, you may be aware of, the Green Man is like the father of nature. He's like Mother Nature, but a kind of male personification. So that's kind of Father Nature. You've got Mother Nature and kind of Father Nature. He's the father of the harvest and fertility. And so you've got this at the head of the May Day procession, often this jack-o'-lantern. Lovely, the boat's on the lake there. And so this is a dancing figure, would be at the kind of the head of the procession. And Jack is thought to be a relic of our kind of enlightened days when ancient ancestors worshipped trees. So if you've got a May Queen, you've got a jack-o'-lantern. Next up, this is lovely. So we've sort of got some over here. We've got, is it bluebells or hyacinths or whatever they are? Some last of the daffodils. We've got little bits of tulips hanging on, but a beautiful, lovely, lovely carpet. So then you've got hobby horses. So hobby horses are like pretend horses, not real horses, they're not meant to look like horses. I mean, it's a person with like a wooden sort of shape of a horse, and like just like more like a sort of like a pantomime cow, if you kind of know what I mean. But the person pretends to ride it, so they've got like false legs hanging down because it's their legs at the bottom. And generally speaking, you know, these hobby horses they'd lift up, and maidens would disappear underneath the hobby horse and come out with a blackened mark. So whether that was like a loss of their innocence, their purity, you know, they go from white to darkness. Who knows what exactly is kind of going on there? But the hobby horses were definitely kind of part and parcel of these. So they're kind of snapping jaws. So again, that's slightly sinister. And again, think Wicker Man, if you've seen it, it's kind of bringing these sort of strange, you know, animals, these half person, half animals, you know, kind of the sort of delightfully strange oddities of these May Day celebrations that seem to be really great. Lovely, thank you. Designed to give us sort of slight sense of unease, to make us laugh, but also to make us slightly uneasy. Often there'll be rival horses that would fight it out, hobby horses, and they'd have their own bands of sort of fierce supporters. You know, so whole villages would be kind of split in half with the battle of the hobby horses on kind of May Day. So lots and lots of these archaic, bizarre, funny, silly, strange kind of customs are going on. And you'd also have Morris dancing. So are you familiar with Morris dancing? So Morris dancing is another one of these sort of English oddities. These men dressed in white with kind of bells and ribbons and you know, kind of sticks, and it's a strange form of English sort of traditional dancing that would often again be following the hobby horses. They would often get up, so right around the country this morning, Morris men dance in sunlight, dance in dawn on May Day. So you get some fantastic pictures. If you sort of have a Google for May Day Morris dancing, you probably see some fantastic dancing pictures against these backdrops, these sort of sunrises. It's kind of this really sort of important sort of part of dancing in the dawn. So again, it's just almost like sort of not prehistoric, but sort of so early pagan tradition linking all this stuff together. But we sort of see it sort of harmless fun, and it is. I mean, from a church's point of view, you might take a different view. It's eccentricity, but it's so linked into our previous version of ourselves, how we were, as you might say, our belief systems, our custom and practice, that it's delightful these things kind of carry on into the kind of the modern day. So it's a kind of a rhythmic sort of stepping. If you've not seen it, Ginny used to do film things like Morris dancing. You don't really get so much of that in so Ossers, yeah, I'll be Ossers in Padstow, that's absolutely right. Polly, the Cornish thing. So again, you a bit like the Helston Fury dance. You know, it's the very, very sort of similar kind of vibe. You know, is this older than anybody can kind of remember practices of celebrations with flowers and hobby horses and drinking and carousing and dancing and celebrations and all these kind of things. So the Morris guys are kind of dancing. They've got sticks and swords and hankies and all this kind of stuff. And it's sort of mock battle, the waving things at each other, sort of slightly antagonising each other. But of course, it's playful dancing. But it's like stags rutting almost. Has a bit of that kind of element, if you're going to know what I mean with that. So Morris dancing is earliest sort of signs of the 15th century, and I'm sure there'll be some kind of predecessor, but in terms of actually being written down as kind of Morris dancers, that's it's about 1448, I think, is the earliest ones. And the term Morris comes from Moorish, so as in Moorish, Spain, you know, the Moors of Spain. So it's a Spanish dance. I thought Ginny might have posted something. I mean, it's up her street. She's very interested in all that kind of, you know, old Englishy stuff. So some lovely tulips down here. Aren't they beautiful? How pretty are they? So there's no known historical connection to the Moors, but other than the name. So of course it's all pagan. And of course what this meant was that these pagan roots did very little to endear these Mayday festivities with either the established church or the state. And in the late 16th century, riots followed when Mayday celebrations were banned. 14 rioters were hanged. This is under Henry VIII. But he said to have pardoned a further 400 who had been sentenced to death. So there was an attempt to crack down on it. This view that it's got too far, it's too mad. We can't control it, perhaps. Maybe this is what about, you know, we can't control this. It's beyond us, you know, and that all our sort of normal appeals to church and to state and hierarchy go out the window because people believe all this kind of mad stuff, as you might say. So they try and kind of crack down on it, but it doesn't go down at all well. But nonetheless, of course, after the English Civil War, we get the Puritans, Oliver Cromwell and his Joyless Brigade. So, of course, they really do set out to ban this stuff. So maypole dancing is put down as a heathenish vanity, generally abused by superstition and wickedness. So they put down legislation which ends village maypoles. So maypoles are kind of cut down. Morris dance and maypoles, all these kind of things are banned under the Puritans because they see it as distinctly un-Christian. And dancing doesn't kind of return to the village greens until the restoration of the monarchy with Charles II, the Merry Monarch in 1660. And he helped to ensure the support of his subjects with the erection of a massive 40-metre high maypole on London Strand. So in order to get people to support the monarchy, it's really interesting that how he appeals to him as a popular, despite opening pubs and dancing, all these kind of fun things, is he has a maypole put in the centre of London, 40-metre high, it's very high on the Strand, the people to dance around. So he's saying, it's okay by me. I see this as a completely valid form of entertainment, worship, whatever you want to call it, custom practice. So in effect, the monarch, despite being the titular head of the church, is embracing these pagan practices as a way of getting back on side with the population, which is kind of interesting, I think. And so the pole kind of signals the return of fun times, and it remains standing on the Strand for almost 50 years in total. So maypoles can still be seen all around the country. As I say, there's quite a good few in Yorkshire. There's very many. There's one 27 metres, Monkton nearby, which is a shame we can't go there because there's no 4G, because it's absolutely one of the most beautiful villages you could possibly go to. But I'll perhaps do some video footage from there before we go. But lots and lots. I'm sure places near you you'll have been to. Barwick, just let me say Barwick and Elmet. There's one over there, I think. They've got a large one in England, so 86 feet in height. And you've still got lots of crowning of May Queens that are happening all over the place. And the gentlemen of the village may be found celebrating Jack in the Green, otherwise found in the signs of pubs across the country called the Green Man. So they kind of hang on, it hangs on in there, even if it's not immediately apparent. It's all there. So Mayday traditions in southern England with the hobby horses that rampage through the towns of Dunster and Minehead and Padstow in Cornwall. The horse, or the os it's normally called. You've got all these grotesque, these colourful kind of caricatures and just delightful oddities that can hanging on from earlier times. In Oxford May morning, they celebrate the top of Magdalen College by singing a Latin hymn of thanksgiving. After the college bells start to ring and Morris dancing is held in the streets below. In Derbyshire, Oak Apple Day takes place, commemorating the restoration of Charles II, and followers carry a procession of sprigs of oak, recording the story of the king in exile. King Charles hid in oak tree to avoid capture by his enemies. So May Day celebrations were very much brought back by the Merry Monarch, otherwise that have kind of come to an end. But there's also a few, just last sort of few to talk about, kind of finish up. May Birching is about festooning a house with different types of foliage, but they could have very different meanings. Wasn't always nice. So, for example, if someone put a thorn on your doormat, it was a message that you weren't very popular. Unless it was a hawthorn, which confusingly meant the opposite. So if it was a hawthorn, it meant your neighbours love you. If it was a regular thorn, it was time to mend your ways. So aside from sort of symbolism, that your May morning message from the community could be in the form of a rhyme. If a pear was left, this was a compliment, as it rhymed with fair. If someone left Wicken or Rowan at your door, they were calling you a chicken. Not as in a coward, but rather a term of affection. And a neighbour trying to call you a liar would leave behind briar. So, confusing the language. A nut or a nut branch by your door was someone's way of suggesting that a slut lived there, but a slut meaning more about slovenly, unkept house rather than promiscuous sense. So gorse, if you want to do the promiscuous thing, leave gorse behind, and that got across the message of what your neighbours thought of your behaviour. So of all the kind of May folk traditions, the tradition of May birching is very much a relic of our kind of remote rustic past, when everyone in a village literally did know everyone else's business. And again, of course, it died out largely in the 19th century. It's lovely. Is it magnolia, this one? So May Dew, I think I mentioned May Dew. I can't remember, but that was basically the idea that collecting the dew that came on May morning was restorative, revitalising. Catherine Aragon was fascinated by this. She had ladies going out collecting the dew for her. So despite the fact that she was a very, very devout Catholic, she was completely bought into the idea of a May Dew. This, by the way, and it's not out yet, but this is a 90-year-old wisteria. So that's going to be influenced. But isn't that wonderful, the way it's clinging to that pillar? Absolutely amazing plant. So that runs all the way across here. Absolutely incredible. So there's also the convention for young women and girls to go out well before dawn on May Day to collect the dew from the grass and hedges, used to wash their faces, to kind of moisturise and make themselves desirable throughout the whole of May. And it was felt this was like a most sort of potent, for during May. That's when you're most likely to meet your true love, was in May. So anointing your face with a May dew was not only considered lucky, but believed to be effective beauty treatment too. And it was kind of thought to keep your complexion youthful and clear of spots and blemishes. So there you go. If your garden's still damp, it may be worth popping out and scooping a bit up and get rid of some spots and blemishes. And also believed to have a powerful healing sort of substance. Samuel Pepys in 1669, the diarist, moans that his wife and maidservants had woken him up about 3 in the morning as they were getting ready to collect the May dew. And he told them to be careful out and about at such an hour and then back off to sleep. So he wasn't that bothered to protect them. So customs still alive today. In Edinburgh, on May Day, you go up to Arthur's Seat about 4 a.m. There'll be lots and lots of people that are using the May dew on their faces. So Tris met her husband on Midsummer. How wonderful. People washing the face of the dew. And a bit like the May goslings you might have heard of as well. This was an old term. A bit like April Fools. So May goslings were those that were subject to practical jokes. And as long as it happened before midday, it was celebrated. So May Day, like April the 1st, was Day of Jokes, and they were the May goslings, those that were subject to the jokes. And I think we're sort of probably coming down. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I haven't mentioned. So we've talked about such an awful lot of bits and pieces. Yeah, Pete couldn't be bothered. He was a bit half-arsed, wasn't he, really? Let me just have another little sip of water. I think we've probably sort of covered. Oh, witches, yeah. So, obviously there is this association with the supernatural, and that actually the witches would also, not only would sort of true love and fertility be its strongest, but also evil. So you do certain things to deal with that evil. For instance, Mayday cheese rolling is something that you might have heard of, and this was the practice of rolling a cheese around a church. It'd be 3 times, it'd be passed round a church, not actually physically rolled, but passed round, and then the people would share and eat the cheese together. It'd be a round, circular kind of soft cheese. But again, it was to ward off evil. The event ended up getting banned because they tend to be quite boozy and rowdy, these things, and they weren't really associated with kind of Christianity. But again, this very deep sense of belief that there was witches and witchcraft, and that you were very, very vulnerable at that kind of time of the year. So the belief that witches and magic were kind of associated was very true, and Rowan was very much kind of associated with this. Rowan was seen, the Rowan tree was seen as a protector against evil. Those that have seen the film The Wicker Man that I've talked about a few times already on this tour, remember, it's not an accident that she's called Rowan Morrison, the girl disappeared. She's been given the name Rowan to protect against, nominally, the evil. Isn't that beautiful? Look at that. So farmers kept rowan twigs, and if their horse would suddenly stop, they'd be given a quick dig of a rowan branch, because it was believed that horses sort of stopping suddenly are being stopped by witches, and the witch would put immobility spells upon animals. So they'd use rowan. And the association of witches is strongest with what they call Walpurgis Night. This is a Germanic tradition embedded across European culture. The festival of Walpurgis Night on April the 30th into May the 1st, dedicated to driving out evil. So Walpurgis Night is named after the English Christian saint St. Walpurga, who studied medicine in the 8th century and became a Christian missionary to Germany. So prior to becoming a Christian, prior to becoming Christians, these people were thought of as heathens, obviously. And it's believed that witches would try and stop the conversions using spells and incantations. And St. Walpurga became known for her ability to repel the effects of witchcraft. So the date of Walpurgis Night coincided with the older May Eve festival, celebrated in much of Northern Europe with the lighting of bonfires at night, which we've talked about before. And a variety of festivals of pre-Christian origin have been celebrated at this time, half between spring equinox and summer solstice, to mark the beginning of summer, of course including Beltane we've talked about. So given that the intercession of St. Walpurga was believed to be efficacious against evil magic, medieval and Renaissance tradition held that during Walpurgis Night, witches celebrated the Sabbath and evil powers were at their strongest. So in German folklore, Walpurgis Night was believed to be the night of a witches' meeting on the Brocken, the highest peak of the Harz Mountains in the range of woodlands hills in central Germany. So to ward off evil and protect themselves and their livestock, people would traditionally light fires on the hillsides, a tradition that continues in some regions to today. In Bavaria, the feast day is something called Hexennacht, literally Witches' Night, on which revellers dressed as witches and demons set off fireworks, play loud dance music, which is said to drive the witches and winter spirits away. So there you go, that is a summary of Mayday. I do hope you've enjoyed our time together in the Valley Gardens, looking at the flowers. The flowers, of course, as I say, are absolutely central to this celebration. It's a fascinating one for me. It's ancient, it's eccentric, it's supernatural, it's kind of pre-Christian, but sort of picked up by the Christians as well. So the veneration of Mary, various saints' days. It's a really wonderful mismatch. And then, of course, you've got this, international socialist, communist, whatever you want to call it, association with Mayday as well. So it really is an absolute blast of kind of custom traditions, but all the better for it. I'm sure. So I do hope you've enjoyed it. I do hope that the picture, the sound, the audio quality was good throughout. And I'll thank you for your time. So I'm going to head back to my car, and I'll leave you all to ruminate on how you can best protect yourself for the rest of Mayday. And just be aware, of course, the witches are at play. You've been warned. Thank you and goodbye.